was going to. Really? And then to help people, let this, not that. I checked it out from the library. But he went through it.
Karen brought this while we're waiting. This 2000 from the Franklin County Library. Plant this, not that. Excellent. A good way to check on invasives.
And a good plug for the library, say,
Oh, yes.
money, save trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give it.
Also, for those of you that want to pursue this water stuff further, I'm saying this before you have to listen to me. I have 4 copies of Texas Waters, which is the official curriculum for the Texas Water Specialist. Take one if you want it. You can get your Texas Water Specialist. You don't have to come to my classes. You're going to hear about half of it anyway. Right here. You can read the chapter and go online and take a little test. The chapters, and once you get all the tests done, you and then you get your volunteer intervention can be Texas Water. I also have a guide to freshwater ecology. This is a little more textbookish kind of stuff available to you if you want one. And finally, quick reference following off on what we heard at the beginning. This is called the Quiet Invasion of Guide to Invasive Species. This is all the different kinds, what they are, how they identify them. And may have a whole.
Is that the book you said, so we would need that book?
You can take this book, it is also online.
Oh, the book's.
The book's online, but I get some copies for the class here, so I'm gonna share some.
Okay.
All right. Want to get started?
Yeah, let's get started. First of all, anybody have any great outings or events that happened this week with in the nature or result?
I had, we had the acoustic bat monitor at my house. Flooded on Monday, and picked it up yesterday. And then we went over to, like Windcrest, where the other place was. And, the ladies, her neighbor that had it on her lake, so we picked that up. And then she had another neighbor who had a pollinator garden backyard, and he's a volunteer at Mercer. But we got to tour his garden and all that, so it was nice.
That's cool. Any bats?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
They're gonna get the data and we'll find out.
Anybody else have anything exciting to share happen this time of week? Out in nature? Crickets? Okay, well, thanks for sharing that, Bowman. We've got graduation coming up. Success, yes, are you excited? Can you believe we've done it? Okay, you're still sleeping. So we got a timeline here for graduation. Project, if you are doing projects, we have 11 project tables right now. If you have not reached out to Virginia, please do so to ensure that we have your space ready for you on projects. That setup will start at 1:40, and like we said before, projects will just be on the perimeter of this room, and it's more of a very casual, where you get to describe what your project is and what work went into it, and what effects you have to move forward in whatever realm that you project demonstrates. For instance, if you're into pollinating, how that's going to affect the pollinators. So project's very exciting to be here at 1:40. 2 o'clock we'll have our welcome announcements for graduation, and then we'll do the meet and mingle for the projects after that, and that will last probably about a half hour or so, and then we will proceed to the graduation ceremony. The tables will be flush against the wall. It will be just seating in here for you and your family or guests, and then we'll have the formal graduation ceremony. After the ceremony, we'll have a group picture of the people who have just graduated. And that usually takes place outside on the bridge as you enter the building. And then we'll have refreshments after that with a lot of good food and beverage. So a great celebration for you all and all the work that you put in to become the Texas Master Naturalist, specifically for Heartwood chapter. And any questions about graduation? Okay, fantastic. Any questions in general from you all? If so, during our break today, you can approach any one of us and we'll answer those for you. The VMS, to get your hours allocated for graduation, please have those in as soon as possible. We recognize that some of you are actively working on your projects and you want to ensure that those hours are included in your graduation hours. Let's just say drop dead would be Friday before graduation. Please try to get that in prior to Friday. Melissa will be counting all those hours to ensure that she has all the pins allocated and so forth for your swag. So speaking of swag, for those of you that are not attending graduation, or you know somebody that's not able to due to prior engagements or appointments, reach out to us and tell me you would like your shirt, your lanyard, all the swag delivered to you, so we don't have to get that to you. Okay. General announcements. TMN Tuesday is June 9th. There will be a groundwater presentation. Keeping in mind, TMN Tuesday also goes to your hours of VMS. Chapter meeting is June 10th. They've had a great presentation on June 10th. Heard on the monarch migration that usually happens with the monarchs going to Mexico. We have a couple that went down to actually see it, and they'll be doing a presentation at the chapter meeting. That's something on my bucket list to go down to Mexico. It's that migration where the are. So great presentation at the chapter meeting June 10th. And Virginia, do you have anything to say about the calendar?
Yes. If you've been on the website since Thursday, you'll notice that the calendar is slightly different. We've now gone to a Google Calendar, and so it doesn't look at all the same anymore. You can click on an item, and it'll give you up a summary of it. You can hit more details. It will hopefully, where'd it go? Well, maybe not. It should tell you where to chart. There it is. To, everything about it. And then at the bottom, usually, where to charge what hours, where to charge your hours. The other thing is it also has a copy to my calendar. So you can copy it straight to your Google Calendar. So hopefully this will work a lot better than the calendar that we had before. We have great communications team that's been working on this.
Awesome stuff. Thanks for that. One final thing, after class, we'll be continuing with key takeaways. Currently, there's a map covering it, but please look at the key takeaways for this awesome presentation today. It's a co-presentation starting off with Michael. You all know Michael, but he's a water whiz, and he's will be out of water. So
That's okay. Now the pressure's on.
so you want to go ahead?
Okay, yep.
So riparian one?
Go to that quote.
The quotes.
Yeah, just a single slide.
Yep.
Okay. I thought I'd start with a couple of quotes. Two of my favorite people, Benjamin Franklin and America. When the well is dry, we'll know the worth of water. And I think that's never been more relevant than what's going on in the state of Texas and the entire Southwest right now, because the well is running dry. Despite all the rain that we've been getting, and the Lake Buchanan's or Buchanan, it depends on if you're from Central Texas, is at 100%. And Lake Travis is at like 78 or 80%, which hasn't been there in years. But don't worry, the fight isn't over yet. The other one, key of that is, and this is very true in Texas right now also, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. If you familiar with the laws in Texas in terms of water ownership, they keep many lawyers gainfully employed in the state of Texas. So remember that as we go through all of this. So today we're going to talk about the riparian environment, what that is, why it's important. We're going to do some water chemistry. That's here. You're going to measure dissolved oxygen. Felicia is going to give us a review of the work she did on hydrology and statistics, and it's really cool, and it so vividly demonstrates what we've been talking about in terms of impact on the watershed of what's happening, especially in Montgomery County and environs close by. Then we'll do aquifers, all about aquifers. And if we have time, the last question, because the last one is who owns Texas water, water governance. And a little dry, no pun intended there, but you'll be amazed at won't be amazed if you're from Texas, how many people have their fingers in the pie at multiple levels. For example, I'll show that map over there, shows water management districts, underground water management districts. They're doing there. The Texas Water Development Board, we'll talk about that. Okay, the riparian world. Let's see if I can make this work. You're close? All right.
He's got it there.
You want me on that side?
Okay, imagine if you will, for the moment, this is 100 tablespoons of water. This represents for us today all of the water in the world. So, all of it. Salt water, fresh water, brackish water, frozen water. So, what I'd like you to do, get 4 tablespoons per liter. Okay. So while she's doing this, I'll tell you what you're watching. She's actually demonstrating to you what's the amount of fresh water. Now, I'm playing fascinating percentages, but basically 96% of the water is not fresh water. Okay. That represents all the fresh water in the world right there.
See clicker?
Not even.
Unfortunately, a lot of this fresh water
Not even getting
is not available.
That's too bad.
It's frozen. It's deep underground. It's contained in the atmosphere and water vapor. So if you would take 2 teaspoons of that. Another really good thing. This is the water available to us as humans. Fresh water that we can gain access to in a reasonable fashion to live. So it's a fairly precious commodity that we have to deal with. You have to take it. Not as far as you can possibly. I would still want. So that the other thing to remember is all the water we have is all the water we have. You don't have another supply somewhere. The truck's not coming in from Mars to bring this. You say, well, why? We have all this technology. Can't we just make water its own oxygen, hydrogen? The answer is yes, you can. But think about the 2 elements we're talking about here on the hydrogen. There's a characteristic of hydrogen. Anybody know? Flammable. The other is oxygen. What's a characteristic of oxygen? Also flammable. The way you take hydrogen in its native state, oxygen in its native state, and make it come together for water is with lots of energy, electricity. You just create an amazingly dangerous environment to make a very limited water. He said, but Michael, what about all this water? We can just desalinate the oceans. We have plenty of water. Yes, you can. At a very high cost. In some cases, it's a cost that has to be paid. Ask the folks in Corpus Christi, Texas about that. They are in dire straits for water. They wanted to build a desalinization plant, or one was wanted to be built. The cost was going to be enormously high, and the citizens are going to pay for it, not necessarily the corporation. They're even running water today. So, precious commodity, and that precious commodity.
I am the remote.
Oh, you're my remote?
Yes. So just tell me what you want to
All
do.
right. So let's go to the next slide.
What do those costs entail? Is it just labor?
Oh, for the desalinization?
Yes.
No, it's building very large plants that use, in some cases, remote osmosis.
Reverse osmosis.
Reverse osmosis, thank you. I knew there was an R there. To pull the saline out of the water, pull the salt out of the water.
Yeah, it's a very fine membrane, and you push the salt water very high pressure through this membrane. Water goes through the salty things, stay on the ice.
So it is an expensive process.
It's an expensive process.
Yes. But given the fact that no water is more expensive, it can be good without. So, okay, I'll let you fly it in. Okay. The riparian zone, the transitional band between the waterway, and we have 191,000 miles of waterway in Texas. And the upland area. So it's right down along the canal, the channel that's there. Generic, kind of a general. It represents about 1% of the Texas landscape. But kind of like that, it's a very important 1%. It keeps the water where it's supposed to be, does what it's supposed to do. You got the channel bank, the water body edge, the land, and the plants, and then a transition to the upland area. So I'm going to draw here. It's terrible drawing. It's water. It's scientific terms for water. The riparian zone is on either side of that. So, simple explanation of where it is. Okay. Why do we care? You know, like, oh, that's pretty. Although some people will tell you, oh, look how pretty this creek is. The park runs right up to the edge of it, nice and flat, and pretty mown grass associated with it. We'll talk about that. It provides ecosystem services. Those are all the things that the ecosystem does for us and for each other. That's where we put plants and animals. That's the space for it. Food and shelter. Huge piece of what the riparian area does is it stores water for later use. The plants, the land, the roots that are there act as a sponge. That's what you hope they do. Is that riparian sponge that soaks it up and then releases it as needed. And we're going. Okay. Flood dissipation. Here's the other. I think it's John Stacy that presented to us, talked about 1950s engineering. Oh, how do we keep an area being flooded? We build a long straight channel and put concrete on the inside, which is great for the people upstream. Because floodwater goes away. The people downstream, however, are gonna get all of the water coming to them at their best. That's not good. What you want, I will tell you, this is one time when messy is better. The messier the riparian area, as long as it's not invasive, the better. Okay. Erosion reduction. You've seen, rivers, streams, where it's just nothing on either side. Rock and sand, and nothing, it's just there. It has been eroded, and it could continue to be eroded because there's nothing to stop the water that comes through. It rolls over and picks it up. Yes, ma'am? All right, characteristics of a riparian zone. If you walk up to the side of the street and you look either side, which is basically what you do when you do an assessment for the intensity. Good stuff in the channel. In the channel, that fallen log, great. There's some plants growing in the channel, even better. Lots of growth along the side, perfect. Dysfunctional, there's not enough stuff in the channel. No rocks, no down logs, no channel bank. If there's no point bar, then we talked about when you were on the geology. Proper distribution of the base materials. When it swerves one way, you create a channel bank. You better hope when it comes back the other way, it drops what it picked up and creates a point bar. That's healthy. Poor distribution. That's there. You don't have a point bar, you get these steep cut down channels that don't do anybody any good. Bank gradient, just what I talked about. Flat is not great. Too steep. Or appropriate so they can stay banked full, they can deal with a lot of the flood. Typical area. Up here. And then you have the large flood. Light and fluffy soil, that's the sponge effect. You want that soil to be able to absorb water as it goes by and store it for when it's needed later. Foliage canopy. And the hotter the water, the more difficult it is for the life that's in there. You want to be able to mediate that temperature. No canopy or cover, just out in the open. You see the place that I do my water testing, my core water testing. It's great for some of these things, but there's no trees anywhere close. They, I think, purposely cut them back. This is Panther Creek, just for reference, for those of you who live in the woodlands, if you know where the Branch Crossing Park is with the tennis courts and the pool on the north side of Research Forest, I do my testing behind that in Panther Branch before it meets their branch. So those are the things you're going to be looking for. Yes, ma'am. What is it? Here's a riparian. In fact, if we're doing water tests, what do you see on those pictures? Just general observation.
No trees near.
No trees near. No shade. It's even worse on the other side. Invasive, one invasive species, elephant ears. They drive me crazy. It's here. I want to just wade out there and pull them up, but I'm afraid I'll be violating some San Jacinto River authority. Yeah, they'll make more. That's true.
This side doesn't seem to be rammed. It looks like it's straight down from the picture.
Yeah, it is. They are fairly steep on the steps. I'm actually, if you were where you are, if you're standing looking at this, you're standing on a little bridge. It just goes with a couple of conduits going through, a couple of culverts over Panther Branch. Here you see it's scoured. You see there is some point bar that I think is caused mainly by the culverts. So that little area, right, through there is a riparian zone. Not magic. Well, it is, but not to look at. So, yes, sir. So here's some terms. Real quick. Base flow is just this. What's a normal flow through there? Stays in channel. Bank full, see, is literally bank full. So it stays within the channel. Flood flow regular. This is where it goes out of our channel, but it's not extreme. We've had some extreme instances in the last few years. Lane's balance model. This is one that is developed. It's comparing what's in the channel versus the water in the speed of. And it needs to be in balance. If the water is flowing too much, you're going to get degradation of the bank because it's sweeping through, not depositing anything as it goes, as it should, but it doesn't. And off it goes, creating lots of erosion. If you don't have enough flow, the balance model falls the other way, you get aggregation, where more stuff is laid into the creek bed than it should be. It's not balanced. So it ends up creating more disruption of flow. It's there. So, and you can look at this and you say, am I seeing more erosion or am I seeing more aggregation? We work to try to view it as, is this creek in balance? Or is there something wrong? There's something going on here. The erosion and deposition, degradation, aggregation. Cut bank. How many went to the geology block? That's pretty crazy. Remember, did he talk about the cut bank where it comes around? The point bar is where it drops off, whatever it's scoured away. You typically love to see a cut bank and a point bar. Acid. The bed load is what it can carry. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about sinuosity, one of my favorite things that I love. Okay. Sinuosity is a descriptive measure of how much a river began. And you go, well, that just seems, what doesn't a lot. Well, in fact, scientists have been here. We're going to create a ratio of distance over straight line. Well, let's go back.
Nope.
And of course, if we're going to be measuring it, we have to create an index. So a sinuosity index of 1 is a straight line. It doesn't meander at all. Just a good thing. You get up to 1.5 based on the scale, and we're going to go into the math. Because we use the guy that came up with this following as a measurement tool, math that can be applied to that. It looks at their tortuousness. Never use that word before I came through this. How dramatically it meanders. The hydrologic and the topographic influence. How much is water influencing this? How much is the land influencing it here? If you've got a really hilly environment, you may get a lot of sinuosity just because of how it has to move around the earth that's there. So you can measure the sinuosity. You want some. That's where when John was talking about 50s engineering, there's no sinuosity in most of the concrete sided channels. All right. Plants in the rock area. You want based on what's happening, you want certain kinds of things here. There's a way to describe these, and you'll see these terms used when you look up a plant and ask about its characteristics. obligate. What do you think that? Be there, has to be there. It has to be in the water. Facultative wet kind of needs to be there, but it needs to be on the wet side. Facultative wet or dry, just plain old facultative, it can be either place. Upland, you find it in non-wet, and then upland, almost always found in non-wet situations. I think pine trees like to be up. They don't like to be wet. Bald cypress. Let's see here. Okay, let's make sure I haven't notified for God. Let me give some examples. Obligate, the water speed well in the pennywort, you'll find in the water, next to the water, in the water. Facultative wet, the common reed, dwarf palmetto. If you see the dwarf palmetto, you know you're in a wetlands area. That's a good indicative species that's here. Facultative upland, the desert willow. Don't see that much here, but in central Texas you do. So that's one way to identify it. Another way is a stability rating. This is basically, do these plants help hold the soil? Do they create the environment to slow the water down, hold the soil, not let it erode? Scale of 1 to 10, showing bare ground. There's nothing there. There's nothing holding the soil. Water can run over it. SR10 is a rock. There's a big old rock sitting right here. It's a 10. There's stuff underneath it is not going anywhere. 6s and 7s are necessary for good bag stability. And there are plants that you can look at to do that. And each plant has a rating. Typically, what does the mass of its roots look like? Are they widespread or do they go deep? Do they go into the water? Does the foliage spread out? And people have done this. This book that I showed you, the riparian, has a stability rating for, and I'll look for every one of those listed in here. Okay? And then we have another way to view those plants in the riparian. You look around and say, are they pioneers? Live where others cannot. These are many times first guys in. You'll see them, it looks like this is just bare rock. There's no soil here. You'll find a pioneer species hiding out there. Colonizers, they spread quickly, putting down lots of roots, stolen or rhizomes, excuse me. They go out. Right at the edge of the water, early stage weak rooted but fast spread. Frog fruit, water speed well falls in that one also. Saltgrass. They are colonizers. They come in after the pioneers. There's some soils that we get into this stuff. They're finally stabilizers, known as a riparian rebar. You know what a rebar is. Woody and herbaceous, slow to establish. Sawgrass, cattail, bald cypress, buttonbush, they do the same thing. They will come in and put down the roots and stay there. Another way to look at the plants in the riparian, you can just walk down and say, oh, that's a so-and-so. It's that's a so. We want all of these. Hopefully, if you want us to, you've made it to the point where they're stabilizers because the first two have done their job. Okay? But there are also plants that have those ratings that we don't want there. Why do we care? I like the lower the biodiversity, they will outcompete all those natives that we want to have, whether they're pioneers, colonizers, stabilizers. Here's some examples. Arundo donuts. I haven't seen a lot of them around here, but on last fall, coming back from College Station, driving Highway 6 out of there, there was a ton of it along the railroad tracks. in the bar ditches that were there. And it is a particularly pernicious invasive plant. It looks like a reed. It is a reed, but it is, good luck trying to get rid of it. It will come back with great ferocity. It's there. Elephant ear, we just saw it. And Noah made a good point. You can pull it all out, it's coming back.
Yeah, I've been killing it. That specific elephant here will send out runners up to 16 feet.
Same way with the arundo. And there's two kinds. We typically, I think, see the elephant ear more than the taro here, if I remember correctly. Diane, we'll let you mention the next one.
Well, we did leave one off because blossom privet is a problem, but in our area, it's Chinese privet, so Ligustrum sinensis.
Yeah.
And it will make absolute thickets. And as it's a more or less an understory tree, we've seen some up to 30 feet tall, but mostly they're gonna be about 15 to 20 feet, and it'll shade out every single thing on the ground. I should show you a picture. I don't know if I have it. Looks like a bomb went off where we cleared an area that's about 100 by 60.
Yeah.
And it was almost all privet. A few native trees were in there, a couple possum haws and yopon. Absolutely everything else was privet.
They outcompete. And finally, everyone, you can boo on this one if you want as a class. We have a chapter member that did a presentation at last year's state conference and then did one for the chapter here that first she tells you all the wonderful things about the Chinese tallow. It's an amazing plant, does all of these amazing things, and then she tells you, but this is the reason you don't want it anywhere near you. And unfortunately, it's everywhere there. Especially, it's bad enough here, but as you drive south of I-10 towards the coast, it's what, 70+% of the canopy of Chinese town. They're one of those, if you've ever watched the Alien movies, you know, the aliens was created killing machine, and the tallow trees were created by the same people. So there's the elephant ear. Bless it. That's glossy. Chinese privet looks very similar to that. And there's the beautiful but deadly Chinese tallow tree. You'll see those, and you don't want them in the market. I mean, they'll do the job. They'll help colonize. They'll do rebar, but they will reduce the biodiversity, which reduces the plants needed for our pollinator species. All the things we've heard about invasives that Ashley Morgan talked about. All right. How do you evaluate that? It's called the bullseye method. It's a form, of course it's a form. You go look at that area I showed you where I was standing looking at you stand there and you look as far as you can in both directions. And you rate these 10 items based on closer to the bulls, closer you put the little circle, in the circle to the bullseye, the better off it is. It exhibits the characteristics that you want. The further out on the circle, it doesn't exhibit these characteristics. You look for, is there an active floodplain around it? Or is it stuck and go out? Energy dissipation. What do you suppose we want to see for energy dissipation in the riparian?
Obstacles,
logs, obstacles, rocks. Anything that allows the energy of the water to be dissipated. Our friends, the beavers, are really good at taking care of the riparian zone, probably better than we are.
think in England, they're letting
Yes.
beavers do their thing,
Yeah.
yeah.
They've also re-imported them to Connecticut. There's a book by Layla Phillips. If you want to read it's a quick read called Beaverland. How this little rodent changed the face of North America, both topographically and economically. It's worth the read. It's there. Do we see new plants colonizing? Yes or no? Do we see stabilizing? Do we see things like frog fruit growing up? Do we see a bald cypress showing up? Age diversity, do we see young plants, old, medium, old plants? Do we see maybe some dead trees, brand new trees? You want the diversity. That means it's alive. Things regenerate. Species diversity. You don't want to see one plant. You don't want to see Chinese privet lying riparian zone.
Or cow.
Or Chinese tallow, exactly, which can grow anywhere. Tallow can grow in riparian, transition, upland, concrete,
It can tolerate salt.
yeah, yes. Yeah. You can grow in a target plug. Do the plants look healthy? Is there enough water within the water table? Or are they really pretty sad? Meaning they're either getting too much or not enough sun, too much or not enough water. Nutrients are weak in that area, so things are not being deposited as they should. Can you tell that there's water storage? It's there. Look at the soil. Check this out. Is the soil spongy? Are there lots of roots? Remember, roots are the way water can get into this. You want lots of roots. That's the channel it gets to. And not, who did we just have? Not John, that did the soil web. Bob Daly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not dirt you're looking for, it's soil you're looking for. Check for the bank and channel erosion. Is there some, if there's erosion on the channel bank side, do you see a magic point? Is it taking care of equalizing itself through the rainfall? Is there sediment deposition? If there's too much, you can clog the channel. It's interesting, if you go back to sinuosity, what you'll see in a lot of flowing streams, depending on what water does, And you'll see a very tortuous stream. But then over here you see Oxbow Lake. The stream said he's going this way and decided, you know what, I'm going to go this way. Abandoning that route, you ended up creating an oxbow. It's there. So you'll see that in a lot of highly sinuous. So you rate all these, you put the number of circles you got in each of the categories and you submit it. And then every 6 months you go back and look. I'm thinking, when I first started this, I went back and looked exactly the same every time. I got about the same results. But then we had that big 6 or 8 inch rain. At least a year or so ago. And I went back and what a difference in bare branch. Panther branch that comes together. A tree had fallen right across the middle of it. And it actually changed the stream flow that came through there. Interestingly, someone had chainsaw down a tree for some reason. And laid across the top of it. I don't know why, it was raining, but the stream would very much different. Channel. So when I go back this time, it'll be interesting to see its return. All right, questions about riparian. It's in the annual, we send it to the Texas Stream. For us here locally, we send it to HGS. You all familiar with HGS, the Houston Galveston Area Council. 17 county organization that looks at not just water, environment, but transportation, a lot of other things, trying to coordinate all that goes on in this giant area. They do a pretty good job actually, on the water side. You have to be certified, it's a one-day class. You're certified on how to do your riparian assessment, you do the same spot, you get a feel of it. If you're interested, you can check through HGAC and get riparian certified, twice a year, go out and do it for sites. Or you can even pick a site. It's okay, you don't know what you do there. It's feel like a scientist. Yeah, evaluating, taking pictures, looking at this scale. Okay. I think that's the end of riparian. Right, questions on riparian? Anybody live near a riparian zone? What, just in your mind's eye, what do you think? Good or bad? How do you think it looks?
I've been there 15 years and during the two floods, I lost, 6 feet. From
Stream bed?
Yeah.
Or from,
from the top of the bed. My dogs used to just walk across into the creek and now it's 6 foot down.
so, what do you think caused that? I mean, we heard about the water, we heard about
The strength of the water, it went under my road. And the outlet was just too strong on that side. On the other side of the road, the creek is fine. It stayed the same. But the force of the water dropped the bed level 6 feet. So we had to come in and do major, you know, a repair.
remediation to it.
It took down my fence, yeah.
And just conjecture,
Yeah,
if you were to walk upstream from your site,
yeah.
what do you see? When you walk up?
Well, me and my son, years ago, when it happened, we walked the other side to see what was, you know, the problem up there, and it had been a lot of construction, clear cutting, increase in the water flow. And so I called the county and they came out and they made some adjustments on the other side to lessen the flow of the water. You know, they brought in concrete and rocks and, you know, kind of repaired right on the county side, not, you know, my side of the fence, but their side.
Right.
We found.
The old saying, everybody lives downstream of somebody.
Yes, yes.
Here's the case where, here's the downstream side. You know, well, it was fine on, you know,
Mhm.
this old saying that I had AT&T days from the technicians, trouble was fine leaving here. Same thing with Saturday. You know, so as long as you don't turn around and just look up the street, it's fine. A lot of that is a maintained proper like food.
Mhm.
That
Oh,
water.
yeah, no, it's just turf, you know, on the other side.
I attended a class that taught designed primarily for rangers about protecting the riparian zone in there. And you see where sheep and goats don't like the people, so they typically don't mess up. Cows will just wander straight in, you know, chest deep to that, make blood on the edge, ruin the riparian environment. And when they walk around in the mud and they disrupt it, who do you think shows up there?
Basic plants.
They love it.
I've seen it.
Yes.
Feral hog can do the same thing.
Feral hog the same way. They can destroy, and a riparian zone is full of all kinds of stuff. They can destroy it. Or as I said before, the beautiful park that goes right down to the edge of the water, whether it's a stream or a lake, isn't that pretty? They mowed it all the way down, right to the water's edge. Looks nice. You know, if you want a Victorian garden. If you want that pond or that stream to be healthy, you want messy land. And for places like the woodlands where we live, we don't do messy. It's very hard for people in the woodlands to deal with this. We want things mowed and trim and let drain, yeah. And most of the developments we're seeing in this part of the world, same way. My son's mother-in-law will come up to the witness occasion. I don't know how you people do anything in the woods. You can't, I can't find anything. All they've got are trees. And my wife is kind of annoying. You know, 'cause she lives down in Houston, Spring Valley. On solid concrete, so. All right. Would you like 5 minutes? Just real quick. We're gonna talk about the chemistry of water. Who had science? This is where the concept came in. We had someone talk about it on one of our June calls. It's citizen and community summit. All of the citizen scientists, and I think the more inclusive term. Now, community science. You have to be a citizen. So we're gonna get into a bit of science. It's here. We all walk away feeling like scientists today, not just naturalists, because they are the same. It's here. Chemistry of water. So, just a little pretty cool. What is water? It's organic, tasteless, odorless, nearly colorless. A polar molecule, that's interesting. It has electrical characteristics. Strong intermolecular hydrogen bond. Well, there's a lot of it. Interesting. It's not a food source, but it's critical, vital for life. It's not even a micronutrient, but you gotta have. People call it a universal solvent. That's where you get a little loose with terms. It doesn't dissolve everything. Everything doesn't dissolve in it. But compared to most things, lots of stuff can go into solution with water, which is a good thing. Based on nutrients you can carry. But think about what goes into our water in our streams. That are here. What the three main components of commercial fertilizer are nitrogen, phosphorus, phosphates, and NPK. Potassium. And the royal, we put that on in bags full. Or beautiful St. Augustine milk. And all three of those things can be dissolved into water and be carried into the sewer and straight into the nearest body of water. So, a couple of properties of water.
Oops, sorry.
And we're going to see one of those properties in action today. You do it next. Water attracts water. There's a little demonstration we do sometimes with trumpet. Red M&M in water, alcohol, and mineral oil. Mineral oil, the red M&M stays a red M&M. Alcohol, it dissolves completely. In water, that red M&M, the red is right out the M&M. Because it's water in the mouth. And it is attracted to the water that doesn't have dye, and it turns it red. Even more terrifying is the evidence you buy in the US. The red that's in those is not in the red evidence you buy in Europe. That dye is red. That's why we now have Miami color Cheetos. Yeah, they still kind of make Cheetos. So, water attracts water due to its cohesive properties. The hydrogen and bond to those, and you'll see with cohesion. That's why you'll see water on lake. See a drop of water that's spirit shaded. because those hydrogen bonds are showing up over here. When you see, you're gonna see when we do the experiment. You see the water how it curves up on the sides on the glass bottom. That's because those bonds are stronger to the glass than they are to each other. So you have cohesion and adhesion. The good thing, think about pine trees. Yeah. Where the water comes from for those pine trees? The roots. How does the water get from the roots to 100 feet up? Some of the properties of water allow it to accumulate. This example is here. Adhesion between the molecules of different surfaces in water. So water can adhere to glass, for example. Cohesion, attraction between the molecules. So they form the sphere. Raindrops. Good example. It's here. Water in the glass that you'll see is a concave meniscus, they call it. Put mercury in a glass tube, and it does the opposite. You get a little mound because the mercury bond between those molecules are stronger than the bond between the mercury and the glass. So, all right. We're going to talk about pH also today. Pure water is a pH of 7. And I put that at 25 degrees because this is where you'll say something like pure water is 7. Well, what if pure water is at just about freezing? My pH might be different. What if it's almost boiling? pH is going to be different. And different property. But if we standardize the measurement, it should be, pure water should be 7 or pH. I'll explain pH in a minute. Typically is that. Okay. So things that you to evaluate water quality. Why temperature? Why would I care what the temperature of the water is for the quality? Could be the amount of oxygen, bacteria growth, cold water, not so much, warm water, much more. Smell. Why do I care about the smell? Some things dissolve in, you can smell. One of the things we do in the cold water drink is after we draw our bucket of water out of the fridge, we smell it. And as I don't know if you all learned in high school chemistry, you never put your face over the water. You hold it as you waft it. We won't be doing any wafting today. But just that's it. I know Stephanie is hoping that's her favorite part. Stephanie, by the way, is also just cool water monitoring. Like I do, she is going to be my quality control person today for me. Clarity or turbidity. That's the fancy. Why do we care if the water is clear or not? Yeah, they're stuck in the water. It could be dissolved in the water, which changes the color. It could be in suspension. It didn't dissolve, but it's in there anyway. When we can measure that quality. We measure the temperature using that. Smell is smell. This is known as a second tube, not second. It's here. It is one of 2 tools you can use to measure turbidity, one of 3. This tube is used. There's also a disc, and Stephanie actually has one. Her site needs the disc for her to get to it. Mine's easy enough. I can put down. First, you pour the water in on this tube. And if you notice at the bottom, there's a crosshatch panel, a black and white. See the, that's just like the big one she told, only small. And this, when you pour the water in, and then you start, you look at it, you can't see the cross. You start letting water out, small amounts at a time, until the very moment you just break out that cross. It doesn't have to be clear, you just, I see it. There's, I see it. And then you measure where that is and record the depth that can then be translated into standardized terms. Second disc, you lower it into the water, and it starts pulling it up so that you can just see, and then measure where the depth of she can see it. And here, so that's a way to measure. Yeah. There's also, when you get into professional monitoring, there is a probe, there is a device you can use. Because what this is doing is measuring the light dispersion. This is very crude way to do it. There are some very laser tubing that they don't have to us. Here goes what we do. NTUs or FTUs. NTUs is what we spot. Our drinking water should have somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.2 to 1 NTU, meaning very few particulates. Clean, clear. I know that there are some communities around the Houston, Galveston area where the water comes out brown. Worry about that. We're going to dissolve oxygen. You measure it in milligrams per liter. On a scale of you do this science here. So, you know, we actually use the picture this method. You don't dissolve oxygen, you can't do that. This method. But you do enough combination of that and I'll read to you if you're interested, that you end up creating iodine in solution, which is an analog to the amount of dissolved oxygen. So you're actually measuring.
I'm tired. Roxanne's a hero.
How do you get it to work?
No, she went and got one. Excited about.
Right. So we're gonna do that. Fascinating. For me, kind of makes sense. You make a move around. It's kind of like not cooking but baking. Because in baking, what's important in baking?
Measurements.
Measurements. You can't just say, oh, close enough. When you're baking. We're talking about pH. The ions in the water to make it either acidic or basic. Chart. It is a logarithmic scale. You need my old math teachers. You can know what logarithmic means. How is it ahead? Things. Each point on the scale is 10x the one below it, or 1/10. So when you go, you get, well, the pH of water is 7, and this is an 8. Well, that's not. Well, that means it's 10 times more basic than the other sample. Basic alkaline is 8.5. Scale for this. Acidic is 6.5. Hydrogen ions, hydroxide ions at this higher concentration of one, considered acid, higher concentration. Move into science and read through this. And finally, one of the measurements we do is conductivity. We do that. Says, why do we care whether water can conduct electricity?
And it depends on dissolved metals and
Depends on what's in there. What's dissolved in that water? Water itself, in theory, pure water is not electrically conducting. That's gotta be really pure water. You start mixing in minerals or other compounds that are dissolved in the water, that solution becomes electrically conducting. And there's a way to measure that. Lots of ways. That guy and the other ones, they did trust us with this device. This is kind of expensive. You have a full device, and you calibrate the device for 2 minutes, and then you check it, and put it in the solution we're doing, and check it, and then we check it again. But it will tell you on a scale what the relative conductivity is of that water. You see it? That front part. All right. And you measure it in microsiemens per centimeter. So what's a microsiemen? It is a microsiemen is an electrical measurement. Let's see it. And I did remember. I don't remember anymore. Yes. Well, but I'm going to show you what kind of measurements to look at. It's here. So now we'll go back to, okay, we've heard all those terms. What does that mean? The dissolved oxygen is like, interestingly enough, we talk a lot about, we have to have plants in the water that help put the oxygen in during the day. So that they can have it at night. Well, that's true. But actually more comes from the air to water connection. So water that has got turbulence on top of it, it's going to be gathering in oxygen, as well as the plankton. So those are the inputs. Photosynthesis by the grasses, seaweed, the plants, mixing of the ocean water, or fresh water, either one. That brings it, what takes it out? The animals, they breathe that oxygen in their gills. The decay of the organic material on the bottom use up that oxygen. It's there. If there's not enough, what happens? Fingers gone. You can see on a pond, for example, that doesn't have a lot of input of that. On a hot day, at the temperature, a whole as much high temperature. A lot of oxygen brought in during the day. Everybody's fine. At night, if there's not enough that's been brought in, because of algae, if there are not enough plants, fish get desperate. And I have seen fish literally tap the surface of the water, maybe about trying to get oxygen through that interface. So we want to know how much dissolved oxygen, especially over time. We want to compare it, and if there's some weird happening, why? We're gonna test that on tap. I was gonna bring in some creek water, pond water. Then I thought, for sake of safety, I don't want anybody to get sick because they ended up with some creek water that did have something in it. So this is, thanks to Monica, this is locally sourced, is a safety restaurant. Locally sourced water from the garden. So when we carry it, low oxygen, kill the fish in it. Or stressful moderate, higher the better. As you get lower and lower dissolved oxygen, you end up seeing some things do better and then it's fine. Or don't do as bad. So, arteries and leeches, they can live in low results. Okay. Now pH. So this is your scale of pH. Hydrochloric acid on one side, sodium hydroxide on the other. Basic alkaline, acidic, over there. Neutral, milk, tap water. Notice they don't put it right at 7. We can do a pH test. You could put a pH test and see what it comes out. Soda, your Diet Coke is the. I like the fact that this scale added gin. I like gin development. And wine on the other side. So if you mix, you start with one and finish with the other, hopefully your system will balance.
So low acidic water, I mean, like something low on pH of water, what would cause them to be more acidic?
That's it. The presence of more hydrogen ions is here. It doesn't have the balance of H plus and OH, hydrogen and hydrogen oxide ions within the water. There are chemicals in there that drive the relative concentration of those ions in one direction.
So would iron make it more acidic?
Don't know. We have chem. Let's look at the timing. She's our chemist in the group. Good question. Now, as the old school teacher, I think, that's a great question, Bowman. Why don't you research that and let us know that? You can buy, that's well, I can taste it. You can buy alkaline water at the HEB, which is up here at around the 8.5 scale. I would think gin would be a better choice, but it's here. But remember what Serena told us about pH scale. It's logarithmic. From 7 to 8 is an increase by a factor of 10, the alkalinity of that. So going from milk to gin, and say we're going from 6.8 to 8.5, 10 plus another 10, 100 times. So it's a stuff on the end is really out. Like forecast.
What does baking soda come from?
Calcium bicarbonate. Yeah,
Is the mineral that comes from the ground?
it's something that's created on the mineral. I guess it has a carbonic acid added to it. I don't know. Again, interesting. I don't get it.
Thank you. I just.
Okay. What do you think blood? What's the pH of blood? Yeah, be fairly neutral. The range is typically 7.25 to like 8.25. It's more basic than acidic, more alkaline than acidic. But when you get somebody into ketoacidosis, you're getting them into that acidic range, which is not what the body wants. You're a more alkaline kind of animal. So we test. This is something you test a lot. When you see a sample, or you look at those of you that are in a mud, or get the information from your water supplier, look and see if they've listed the pH. Or ask them, what sort of average pH? It ought to be somewhere around neutral. It may be a little more basic. We'll find out from that. So, pH in the water out, run around the ground, streams and lakes. Bacteria, they'll go wherever. They can survive in lots of environments. Plants, more basic than acidic. They don't like acid. Catfish, most of them are in the middle. But notice bass, bluegill, crap, they're very limited range. They can go into stress fairly easily if the water gets out of balance in terms of its pH. Snails, clams, mussels, and then most aquatic animals are in that, as you see, more basic and acidic range, just like we are. So we test the pH and see. I will tell you the water coming out of Panther Branch, most of the times when I test it, is more acidic than it is basic. It's 6 to 6.52 when I do the range. Some of my speculation on some of that is what's been run off from there. I'm also not far downstream from a water treatment facility. There's a water treatment facility hidden behind Bear Branch Park. One of the three that SJRA, San Jacinto River Authority, runs them in. So I'm getting some of the downstream water that's been cleaned off of that. So there could be some more acidic compounds in there. So 1 microsiemens equals 1 ampere mole. I am not an electricity guy. If there is anybody here, they could explain that to me. I've read it and it just goes. It's one of those, I don't know if you have things, I do. I read it and it makes perfect sense to me as I'm reading it. And then I look up and I go, what did that just say? And I read it again, oh yeah, but it doesn't stick. Distilled water, typically, hopefully, has very few things in it. So it has a very low conductivity. Melted snow, you see tap water, 550 to 800. We could test this if we wanted to. I take a little. Potable water, it's got a standard. When you get into the industrial wastewater and brackish water, you're getting into a lot of saline in the water, so it gets in that 10,000 plus range.
How about rain?
Rain, I think, typically comes down in the kind of the same range as snow, I think.
Okay.
Did you cover any of that?
It's a little more acidic.
A little more. Yeah, good point. Rain is more, but remember, look at your old title. The whole acid rain issue that occurred in the Northeast back in the 70s. Yeah. With all the pollutants coming in the rain. Yeah. Got dramatic to the point of killing plants. So we looked at pH, we talked about dissolved oxygen, we've talked about the conductivity, the temperature of water, the smell of water, what about the taste? Please don't taste. Unlike Adrian and her taste test, or scat, we're not doing it. So somebody says, here, drink this. What does this taste like? Don't do it. That's back to my college test. All right. So we'll do some chemistry. All right. I had 6 test sets, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 17. So groups of 3. Our training team can join also. Lisa, you're welcome. Yes. What? Do some chemistry. All right. All about aquifers. We talked a lot about surface water. This morning we talked about it rolling across Cypress Creek and its watershed. We talked about the riparian area, which services the surface water, which, by the way, can we come back? This is just about aquifers. They're an amazing part of our world. They're geological formations with hydraulic properties. What does that mean? Porosity, permeability. They can push water. There's pressure in those. Storage and transmission through there. They store, transmit, and give access to groundwater. Critical piece. There are parts of Texas that 100% of the water for the community, San Antonio, comes from an aquifer. In the woodlands, if you're serviced by San Jacinto River Authority, approximately half of the water that provided to your house comes from aquifers. The other half from Lake Conroe. And then other water groups, some of that is 100% in the private water tank. And maintaining both springs, rivers. So if the aquifer is low, the water table falls. It's now a confined aquifer, and the river goes away. It doesn't go away. It goes underground. Rivers don't go away. It's, oh, the creek's right up. No, it's just the water table is point where it's running underneath where your feet. Here. 60% of the water used in Texas is water. Now think about the growth we've seen in Texas. Think about the number of data centers that are proposed, many of which will never get built, but a lot are proposed. And then a lot of irrigation. More and more irrigation for agribusiness is occurring because of climate change. It's getting drier. There's a line, the 100th meridian runs on a line straight down the edge of the western end of the Panhandle, straight down through Texas. It's sort of the line scientists, geologists, meteorologists use it. The east of that line is wet, west of that line is dry. That 100th meridian, that concept is moving eastward, getting closer to us. The state is drying out. Climate change, and for whatever effect reason you think it's happened, is causing that. Lots of aquifers. You get 9 major and 22 minor in Texas. Lots of aquifers in Texas. Lots of ways you can describe aquifers. Lithographical characteristics. Unconfined with contacted roots. We sit on top of an unconfined aquifer. Right here. We'll see it when it's called Chico. Their karst are carbonate, either limestone or other materials. The Edwards aquifer that people hear about, which services the Austin area, is a limestone aquifer. Lots of caverns and caves and lots of limestone rock deposited millions of years ago when that was ocean floor. You can do it by texture, porous or fissured. Porous, it goes through the pores, the inlet evangelum, that's one that sits also just below us, where we're standing. Edwards aquifer is an example of fissured. Fissures and spots. Fissured aquifers, for example, the Edwards aquifer can refill and empty fairly quickly. Because of that, it can change dramatically. Some aquifers, like the ones we're standing top of, have much more clayey soils, and it takes much longer for the water to get through them. And all of that, and all those words were got. If it's saturated, all the spaces are filled. That's a good thing. Unsaturated, it's got there's open spaces in the rock that contain air and water. Here, the water table is the upper limit of the saturated zone. So if the water table is high, your creeks are going to be high, your lakes will be full. You don't have to dig down very far to see water forming in the hole. It's there. As the water table drops, all of those things drop. Seasonal variations and groundwater. take, drop a well in and you start pumping water out, the water table will drop. Very simple. The recharge area is the area where that particular aquifer comes to the surface and water can get into the aquifer. Yeah, an unconfined aquifer, that can be all the way across the top. Confined aquifer, which we'll talk about, there's a particular recharge zone. In Texas, one of the more famous ones is the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone, which has a lot of regulations around building in that recharge zone. Because if you fill it up with target parking lots, it's not going to recharge. And then San Antonio will be without water. A confining layer of aquitard, some aquifers are confined. They have rock above and below them so that the water flows in between. I'll show you that, but it doesn't have a way out until it gets to the ocean. This is what I mean. The lake, the stream, the water table, the unconfined aquifer. It's here. You can get to it. You get to a well into it. It helps with the water. However, a confined aquifer has these layers of non-permeable, less permeable surface. It's there. The water's down there and it's flowing and you can get to it. A lot of them you get to through an artesian well that sinks down into that aquifer. It's here. This won't flow because it's above the level of where the aquifer starts. This one, however, it can flow. We have all of these sitting, we're standing right on top of all of these. I want to show this because this is part of my youth. Growing up in San Antonio, home of Pearl Brewery, it says beer brewed with pure artesian water. Because they let us be the best water possible. They said, for the land of 1,000 springs, they call it. Excuse me, not just 1,100. It's here. There are artesian wells that took the water from it out of the end of the aquifer. They brewed it. But it just reminds me of my youth. You'll see that artesian water on lots of things. It just means it came out of confined water. Now, it typically comes out of clay because there's less pollution that can get into it. It's your beard. Lots of big aquifers. See a picture of these. Ogallala, we'll talk for a moment about that. Largest in North America. Stretches from far up in the Midwest, Kansas, Nebraska, into the Texas Panhandle. Huge aquifer that is being pumped dry at a rapid rate. It is not keeping up with the recharge. It's not keeping up with the pump. And when you see where it is, think about what's grown in Kansas, Nebraska, eastern Colorado, which is where she said she's from. There's lots of crops in the irrigation. Three, we're going to also talk about on the Gulf Coast, is out of that whole system, Chico, Evangeline, and Jasper, 3 aquifers that run through Montgomery, Walker County and across. The Edwards, we see that one. The Trinity Aquifer, much of central Texas, there, and then there's a bunch of other ones. This is the Ogallala, just to show you. Largest in the U.S., covering 122 million acres. Sand, gravel, clay, silt, maximum thickness of 800 feet, average freshwater thickness of 90 feet. They say freshwater because a lot of aquifers, if you get too deep, they get to be briny. Less useful. See where it's formed, producing That area produces about a fifth of the nation's wheat corn economy. And imagine water's coming in from South Dakota, how long it would take to get to the Panhandle. And if it gets stopped along the way, it's never getting there. Some say a drop of water that starts in South Dakota could take 10,000 years to get to Texas. And we're up like crazy. That's one of the major ones. Here's the major one. Those of you that have been to a lot of these classes, what looks familiar about this? The geology of Texas looks sort of like this map. What else? The soil maps, the ecoregions. You start overlaying those onto this, and there is the aha moment that comes across here. I'd love to put a map like this up. It just shows Texas. Because you walk away saying, well, the Gulf Coast stops here and stops when you get to Louisiana. No, the Gulf Coast aquifer extends all the way across the Gulf Coast. It's here. We're just showing you guys. These are gigantic aquifers. And here, lots of them you can see the names of them, but there's a lot more on the eastern side than the west. It's out there. So far, good thing is true. And then there's lots of minor aquifers that they've identified. One of the more important for us is the Yago and Jackson. Okay. So we've got lots identified, lots of people pulling water out of those. Also, I ran into this article recently. The whole issue, all of these aquifers along the U.S.-Mexico border from California across that point out something. Water doesn't care about a city boundary, a county boundary, a state boundary, or a country. Water does what water does. It's up to us to figure out how to manage that amongst ourselves. And what's happening along the Rio Grande is it's dried up. And the U.S. and Mexico are in a fight about Mexico releasing water in the Rio Grande to help rebuild the aquifer because the water tables are dropping, so the Rio Grande is dropping. More things to consider. Okay, here we are. Okay, that's great. Amarillo's running out of water. What about me? What about us? Montgomery County is right here, and this is a cross section of the aquifers that are right underneath our feet today. Chico Aquifer, which is an unconfined aquifer, so feeds our water tables. The Evangeline and the Jasper are two of the other major ones that are accessed in this part of the world. Outcropping, for those, okay, Grimes County, which we feel. And like development happening in Grimes, we pushed out. As you can see, the Jasper is a confined aquifer. Evangeline is a confined aquifer of sorts. It's here, so they're not contributing as much to water table. They are an important source of water. The Saint River Authority, most of us are somewhere around living in that part of the world, that provides water to the Woodlands. When they build a water plant or they build a station to get water, they drop two wells, one into the Evangeline and one into the Jasper, each station where they have water, underground water. Why? Why not? I mean, that seems overkill. Why would we do that?
Maybe you could draw from both, so they're not drawing. from just one. I mean, so they're not sucking on
That's
the
right.
eye.
Helping them recharge, but they're not one. The characteristics of some of these aquifers is that once they go dry, you can't fill them up. The soil that's in there, once it compresses, can be uncompressed. Forces are too strong, you get the water back in them. So they're gone. And you see some of that on the surface as subsidence. The ground falls. There's mild subsidence in the western part of the river. You go down south of Baytown, the most famous example of this. A beautiful subdivision was built down there in 60, I think it was. But because all the water being pumped out of that part of it near the coast, that subdivision sank by feet. And people had, without the houses are underwater, the ground sank by feet as they pumped the water. That's what began, kind of the alarm bells went off. But after, the science is still real. It's occurring. There are measurement stations located around Montgomery County that measure how much it's dropping. If it drops, it doesn't come back. From these. So this is better showing sort of where on the Texas side the Evangeline is and how deep, how thick it is. Starting there up the up dip to the down dip, from up to where it ends up hitting the Gulf of Mexico. It's very deep, very large. You can see the rivers that it supports. There's the Jasper sitting right beneath. We're very fortunate in this part of the world. The amount of aquifers and water that we have. Topics. Then this development where people are saying, well, why don't we just put water back in to the aquifer where we can? So ASR, aquifer recharge and aquifer storage, where they're taking water that we treated. We took it out of the aquifer, we used it, we treated it, we're getting ready to dump it back into a stream, Spring Creek, for example, or Peach Creek, or Cypress Creek. Why don't we just put it back in the ground and reuse it again when we need it? Put it in the ground to store it, or put it in the ground to reuse it. One's just replenish the aquifer. The other one is used to store it, which they'll get later. Ones are just trying to keep it from running dry. Not a inexpensive process to do. Some are trying. And then we've talked about the subsidence that's here. The compaction is irreversible. Once the aquifer's gone, it's gone. It becomes a non-permeable surface. Finally, this is something that's coming up where they call them zombie or uncapped wells. Have anybody read about some of these? Have you heard this issue? So much poor regulation or non-regulation occurred over the years in Texas with oil wells that were drilled and not properly capped when you're done with them. So they begin to leak. You're basically punching a hole in the aquifer and giving away for contaminants to get in there. These wells are leaking oil. Someone can be leaking natural gas in there. So what they did in the first place was get the oil out of the ground.
A lot of them used to be, San Andreas oil producers, and then they were converted into water injection wells for disposal water, so. You've got nasty disposal water that's a mix of brine and your drilling muds with all kinds of chemicals in it, and you're just injecting millions of gallons into this formation, and then you have these old busted wells with corroded casing, and the pressure builds up underneath, and they just start exploding. And then you have, just wastewater all over the ground. Yeah, it's a big issue.
And then trying to find the company that originally drilled the wells. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, I don't know if all companies are like this, but I worked for Pioneer Exploration LLC, and they did not care about those zombie wells at all. We got people coming in and telling us, the people that got royalties who were up, they would talk to us and they didn't care. They would just like push it aside all the time.
Because it costs less money to mitigate it than to have it properly, like clean it up.
Yeah.
Versus actually fixing it. Yeah, it's about needs.
Yeah. If you haven't been following, you just watch what shows up in the news. Because they're trying to build greater regulations, but trying to build regulations when you have a lot of companies that don't want you to build the regulations. Right, so talking about surface water, and now we're talking about aquifers also. Questions on aquifers? Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just curious if the major aquifers that you talked about, you didn't talk about what their current status is, right? So the ones that are going down.
The ones from Montgomery County are okay. I mean, the state that is, the other group pump, they pumped at an increasing rate. The problem we have in this area is with wells, exempt and non-exempt wells. And trying to get, I'll touch on it, I should have had one other.
Are you talking water well?
What?
Water
Water
wells
well.
specifically?
In Texas, the law is, right of capture. If you own the land, you can poke a hole and pump as much as you want, in theory. It's yours. And if that harms the fellow downstream of you or down aquifer of you, the answer to that in the courts for a long time was have them build a bigger well. Some of that is changing. I'm not nearly fast. That's why I talked about if you have children or grandchildren that are there and they want to be gainfully employed for the next 50 years, have them go to law school and specialize in water laws. Because it's for drinking, water's for fighting. And then there's some of that. Trying to monitor, manage, and permit wells is one of the things that helps with that. And it was recognized as an issue by the Texas Water Development time. We can talk about it. But they built, set up underground water conservation. They're supposed to do some of that. And try to mitigate the loss of it's working much better here than it is in West Texas. And because I get a lot. As it becomes the well is dry, worth of water. Right. 5-minute break, and I'll ask you this. One more presentation. Y'all been sitting for a long time. About who owns Texas Water and who doesn't. All right? Just say, see that? You good with it? 5-minute break, and then we'll go. I'll go for a break. For those that don't know, Mrs. Houston is our chapter president. Is here. She's unfortunately not going to be able to do graduation. And so she wanted to come today and say a few words.
Yeah, so I'm really sad. I haven't missed a graduation since I graduated, so I just wanted to come today and see the event. Glad to see there's a great turnout. I've met many of you through volunteering opportunities and pulling it into others' day. Well, I've met a lot of you now, but there's a lot of new faces that I haven't seen before, so I just wanted to say congratulations. Sorry I can't be with you, but this is a really big day coming up. I've heard about some of the projects that are going on. I'm really sad I'm gonna miss those. But welcome to the team. That's all I can say. So I think you've gotten the whole spiel about Heartwood and we're about 150 members, which you will become a core part of. And I hope you've heard about Ellis unit as well. Yes, no?
Did we talk about Ellis? No, I don't think we did.
Ellis unit. Okay. Let me just talk about that for a minute. You've heard about the Friends of Lake Livingston and then.
We did talk about that.
It's an integral partnership with a training class that's going on at the Ellis unit of our prison system. And so about, gosh, I can't even remember how many years ago, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, two of our members, Scooter Langley and Scott Ball, came up with this great idea to help rehabilitate prisoners in our system by teaching them the Texas Master Naturalist Program. And one of them, Scooter Langley, is actually a college professor at Lee College in horticulture, which is perfect, right? So for that program, these prisoners go through the same thing that you're going through, and we have our teachers go out there and teach them. And so they are part of our system as well. So there's going to be a graduation for them the week after that I get to go to as well. So pretty exciting. So I get to welcome all of you to Heartwood as members after the graduation. And then I get a week later to go to the prison and welcome a class of about 20 prisoners that are going to be joining our program as well. So our numbers will swell a little bit. I'm very proud about that. And I hope you all become very active members. There's lots of ways to do that. I know everybody has talked to you about that. And as I said, I've pulled a lot of you into some programs. So continue to do that. I guess that's it. I just wanted to say congratulations and kind of give you a face to the front of the program. I know we talked about committees. If any of you need to get some hours, volunteer hours, committees are a great way to get there fast. So whether it's the training committee, outreach, membership, programming, there's a lot of ways to earn hours without getting your hands dirty. So just talk to any of us, your mentor, myself, et cetera, to help you find a way to do that and find your. Congratulations once again. Diana?
About the
Banquet committee.
Oh, yeah. There's some ad hoc committees as well. I have actually, is Rebecca?
No, he's not here.
Okay, Rebecca actually volunteered to be on the banquet planning committee. So we have an intern helping us with that. I have a few people that are helping, but we can always use more. So if you're interested in planning our banquet, which is our last chapter meeting in November, where we basically celebrate all of our accomplishments and have some food, let me know. Just send me an email. I'm heartwoodprbs@gmail.com. And feel free to email me about it. Again, congratulations.
Lisa, the Ellis unit, actually, people that go through that unit, that program, can, by testing through Texas A&M, get a certification as a horticulturalist tech, so that when they get out of prison, they have a skill they can go use to get a job.
And we're that.
Yeah.
Some of them are going through the horticultural program, not just to be a tech,
But
actually to get their degree. They do this Texas Water Specialist program. That was the last classes they did a week or so ago. And so they're now Texas Water Specialists. And so they are members of the Heartwood. So I will either to sign their certificates, I just signed yours, and to present those. And Mary Pearl usually comes as well. It's a pretty big deal. So I always tell my husband, I got to go to prison for the day. And it's pretty exciting, but they not only get their degrees in horticulture, but a lot of them get their degrees in business and all sorts of things. And so it's kind of nice going back year after year. I've been in it for a few years to see the people that are actually have gotten out and doing their thing. And I've actually been contacted by a couple about how to actually become members of the Heartwood chapter, full stop. So. there you go.
Thanks. All right, Felicia. This is Fee Sainer. She's one of your fellow interns that's here. And I'll let her explain what where this data came from and what she's been doing. And it's all yours.
Alrighty. I'm Fee. I've been here all along. So, I will not be here next week, so I figured I would share some of the work that I did for a hydrology course with y'all, as kind of my final project as well, since it's very relevant for us in this area. I am doing a graduate certificate program through Missouri Science and Tech. I already have my master's in geology, but I'm very interested in the water story as well. But I took open channel flow and advanced hydrology. Advanced hydrology, I was a little bamboozled. It was actually a statistics course. So we're going to look at some statistics today. I'll try to keep it relatively high level so I don't put you all to sleep. But I think the information here is very relevant to a lot of the work that we've been looking at for prairie and wetland restoration through the program. So in we go. So the point of this project was to determine if land use change was changing the magnitude of our floods based on runoff. And I was also interested in when this change may have occurred. So in a lot of hydrology statistics, we assume stationarity. That means that the flood regime is basically consistent through time. Something that we are becoming more familiar with is climate change. And that means that our statistics may not be stationary. They may be non-stationary, meaning they are changing through time. So I was interested in that time aspect. So we're going to look at first a spatial analysis of the Cypress Creek watershed, and then we're going to look at some of the statistical analysis from stream gauge data. So first and foremost, the spatial analysis. I think this will be really interesting for everyone. It's very visually compelling, so it'll tie back to a lot of the stories that we've already heard. So we are going to be looking at the Cypress Creek watershed. So there are different sizes of watersheds. There's a watershed for the entire Mississippi basin, right? And that's like half of the United States. But then you can start kind of narrowing it down to smaller and smaller watersheds. We're going to be looking at the Cypress Creek watershed in Northwest Houston. So we're all fairly familiar with Houston. This was, for my Missouri peers, just to get them acquainted with the area. So our stream flow data is going to come from 3 locations. Initially, I wanted to find an area that had urbanization, but also an area that was more rural. So this became like the perfect watershed because the eastern side very heavily urbanized, the western side not so much. So, and I also added the Little Cypress Creek gauge because it's kind of an in-between. Like half of its history is more rural, and then as we progress through time, we get a lot more urban. So I thought it was like this really perfect data point to kind of illustrate how it is more in flux. Okay, this is the interesting thing. So we're going to play through this. This is a video with land use change for every year between 1985 and 2024. So about 40 years. We're going to play through it 3 times. The first time, just observe. The second time, we're going to focus on the gauge on the far left side. And then the third time, we'll focus on the gauge in the middle. The color scheme in general, your yellow colors are going to be like pasture land. Your brown colors are going to be crops. Blue colors are going to relate to water. So the more steely blue is going to be like herbaceous wetlands. The pinks and reds are going to be our urbanized impervious surfaces. And by impervious, I mean concrete buildings. You're not going to be able to pass water through those surfaces. So, and then green colors are going to be our evergreens, evergreen forests. So let's hit play on this at the bottom there.
Oh, God. Where is it?
So if we go on to the slide, yeah,
there
let's hit
it
the
is.
play button. Yeah. Okay, so just observe, we're stepping through time from 1985 to 2024. We start to see some changes in our crop usage. And then some of our evergreen forests are kind of disappearing. And then we get into the 2020s and boom, just a ton of red.
Wow.
Right? Wow. Yeah, very like visually compelling, right? And if anyone has any issues with color differentiation, please let me know. I will make a more contrasting.
Let's do it again.
The red is going to be our developed surfaces like buildings, roads. Yes. Okay. So we're going to play it again. And I want you guys to focus primarily on this left gauge area. So in the yellows, we have pasture, browns, we have cropland, blues, we have wetlands. So kind of not a ton of change. We get less cropland, a little bit more pasture land, generally not changing a ton. And then around that, later in the 2020s, we start to actually see more of those blue colors relating to our wetlands. So it's kind of at the end, we start seeing a lot more blues in this area. Okay, so we're gonna play it one more time, and I want you guys to focus on the middle circle, which is our third gauge. So this is gonna be Little Cypress Creek, which is a tributary of the Cypress Creek. We see that it starts out pretty rural, right? Lots of yellows, a little bit of greens. And then as we get into the 2000s, right around the early 2000 mark, we start seeing a lot more pinks coming into and around that circle area. So we have a lot more developed acreage in that area, a lot more buildings, a lot more roads, just kind of all around that spot. And then of course, at the end of the video, on the far right side, we have that very heavily urbanized gauge location. That's going to be a gauge at Cypress Creek and 45. So we know heavily developed around there. Okay, so moving on, we want to kind of keep this in mind as we get into some of the statistical analysis, okay? So if we look at this quantitatively, we can pick out each of those different colors and graph them. So I'm most interested in the pink colors here, and we start to see kind of an inflection point around the early 2000s. We saw that especially in that middle gauge, where we saw like a really big ramp up in that developed surfaces in the early 2000s. And there's also a corresponding inflection point in our undeveloped lands, our open kind of pasture lands up here at the top start to decline as of the early 2000s. If we just group everything into undeveloped and then developed, we can see a very clear correlation. As of the 1985, we have basically a 3-to-1 ratio of undeveloped land to developed land. So pretty good there. And then in the early 2000s, we see this pretty extreme ramp up in our developed land. And then as we get into about 2022, we have a 1-to-1 ratio of undeveloped to developed land for that entire watershed. Okay, now we get into the nitty gritty. I'll try to keep it fairly high level. So we take the, okay, jumped ahead on me. Go back. Very slowly. One more. You got it, little guy. Okay. Okay, so we take the gauge data. So this is actually average daily data. So we have one data point for every single day in that 40-year period. So that's actually quite a bit of data, right? So when we're looking at this statistical analysis, we want to make sure that we have continuous data. We don't want to have null gaps. The programs, they don't like that. We need continuous data. Even if the data point is 0, at least it's not like an NA or a null value. So we need at least some data. So first and foremost, check that box. We have continuous data for all three gauges. Great. Second point, we have some parallel responses between the three gauges for major events. So we see peaks around the same times for extreme events like the tax day floods and then Hurricane Harvey. All three of the gauges, the brown, the yellow, and the red for the three gauges in the previous pictures, they all have a corresponding and parallel response. So just looking at the raw data, not really manipulating it yet, we see, okay, we have continuous data, we have similar responses. This seems like a relatively good data set. So we're checking those boxes, everything looks good. So just baseline summary statistics, we look at our mean, our median, and our maximum values. We're not going to talk too much about standard deviation or skew. In general, we're going to have a very positive skew for hydrology because you have extreme events on the far right side of your graph, right? So it's going to positively skew your data towards the right. We're not as interested in that for this work, but it's good to keep in mind for hydrologic data. You're never going to have a negative skew. That's not going to exist in nature for hydrology. So because we have these very extreme maximums, we are going to be more interested in our median values, which is like the midpoint in our distribution. The mean is the mean is the average, right? It's going to be blown out by the very large extreme events that we have because of flooding. So for instance, at gauge 1, if you look at the maximum value, 29,000 cubic feet per second, that was Hurricane Harvey. That is an astronomically large number. So that is going to positively skew or kind of blow out our median, so our mean, excuse me. So we're more interested in the median, kind of the baseline number of what we would expect to see. Okay, so there are a couple of different analyses that are going to be fairly common when we're talking about hydrology. One of those is a flow duration curve. This is basically how all of the data for each of those gauges distributes with respect to probability. So if you were to pluck a number from one of these long sweeping curves, then 10% of the time, it is going to be oh my goodness. Sorry. 10% of the time, it is going to be above 661 cubic feet per second. 90% of the time, so the Q90 number up there, it is going to be above 26.6 cubic feet per second. So these values, or the shape of these curves, can tell us a little bit about the streams in general. So the first gauge, gauge 1, our easternmost gauge, where we intersect with Highway 45, this is going to be our urbanized area, right? We're going to have a more steady base flow that is going into Cypress Creek. That means we have wastewater discharge, we have like a baseline irrigation runoff. There is a consistent influx into Cypress Creek in our urbanized areas because you have consistent runoff. Whereas in our more rural gauges, you see that it dives down to 0. That means occasionally, and by occasionally, I mean for gauge 2, about 22% of the time, that gauge goes to 0. That means that the creek dries up. There is no flow through that gauge. And about 10% of the time at gauge 3, which is at Little Cypress Creek, that gauge is also 0. So these are more climatically or seasonally controlled streams. Occasionally, they run dry. Whereas at gauge 1 in the urbanized area, it does not. It usually has flow, like almost consistently always will have some sort of water flow, usually because of runoff. Another thing I wanted to mention from this, by taking the ratio between our 10% and 90% values, we can get a flashiness index. And by flashiness, I mean it's a ability to be flash floody. So with, gauge 2 and gauge 3, we have much higher values. And for gauge 2, you'll see that the Q90 value is actually 0. In nature, we can't divide by 0. The universe would explode. So if we just assume that instead of 0, it's just a very, very small number, like 0.0001, then we can divide our Q10 value, 99.2, by a very, very small number. When you divide a number by a small number, you're going to get a very large number as a result, right? So that stream and gauge 2 in the far west, they're going to have a higher propensity for flash flooding. That's all that means.
Felicia, it would have been interesting to do this same study on the Guadalupe River last year to see historical, because it hit. It is a very flashy river, because when it floods big time. So just
Yeah, like through the hill country.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so moving on from here, quantile regression. So basically what we're looking at here is the median. We talked about the median before. So basically the kind of baseline for the data and how it compares to the upper 1% of values from that gauge. So we're comparing the slopes of these two lines. And you will see that at gauge 1, keep in mind, this is a logarithmic scale. So even if the line looks like it's really steep, it may not be based on the scale. So keep that in mind. The values are in the table on the right. So the ratio at gauge 1 is actually very, very high. So it's at about 40. So what that means is that the extreme values are changing 40 times faster than the median. So the kind of general baseline of how the water system exists, the extreme events are changing 40 times faster than that. That is very high. You will notice that gauge 2 has a relatively negative slope on both the median and the extremes. That's really interesting. If we think back to our land use, right? We had a much more rural area with a lot more undeveloped land around it. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Gauge 3 is a little bit in between, and I would be really interested to see how it behaved before around 2000 and after 2000. So before 2000, it was predominantly rural. After 2000, we had a lot more development. Would there be a change in the relationship, in the ratio between these two slopes at around that break point? So that would be something I could do as continuing work. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to do with this project was determine if there was a point in time where things changed. And one of the federally mandated and standardized analyses that are done for hydrology, it's called the log Pearson type 3 analysis. So when someone is talking to you about a 500-year flood, a 1,000-year flood, a 100-year flood, they are probably referring to a log Pearson type 3 analysis that was done on that watershed. That analysis provides estimated magnitudes for floods at those breakpoints, at those 500-year, 1,000-year, because we don't necessarily have data that goes back 1,000 years, right? We have to extrapolate it. So that's what the log Pearson type analysis does. Generally speaking, that analysis is going to have a cluster of points in a linear trend, and then you're going to have a line of best fit. And that line of best fit is how you extrapolate out to your 500,000 year, et cetera. So what I wanted to do here was create a time series. In order to figure out a time stamp on something, you need a time series. So instead of having just like one linear trend that assumes stationarity, I wanted to create a rolling 10-year window where my program basically looked at 10-year increments, stepping forward 1 year at a time, and at each year, creating a value for the 1% flood event, essentially the 100-year flood event. in order to do the next thing, which is figure out where is the break point. So you'll notice from these three graphs or three lines, the top gauge is going to be the one that intersects 45. That's going to be our urban gauge. Gauge 2 is going to be on the far west side. And then gauge 3 is Little Cypress Creek in the middle. You'll notice that gauge 1 and gauge 2 have a very parallel and they're very related with how their curves look, which would make sense because they're part of the same tributary, right? Gauge 3 is its own little beast because it's a separate tributary to Cypress Creek. So it behaves a little bit differently. And then you'll also notice that it has a different trend like around the year 2000, where it starts to pick up, could be related to the uptick in urbanization for that area. And then you'll also notice after around 2005 here, the values start to decrease pretty significantly. And I believe this is due to a pretty significant like drought period for that time. So we have a lot less signature during that time. And then around 2012, everything starts to pick up again because that's when the drought essentially broke. So can we figure out a timestamp for when things actually change? Yes, you can. And the tool used is called a Petit test. Basically, what it is doing is figuring out at what point does the data look different before and after a point in time. So the limitation of this is that it can only do it once on your data set. So in reality, there are probably several significant breaks, but for the purpose of this study, it basically comes up with one. And I would say that the break for the more rural gauges is around 2012, and that's going to be related to the break in the drought, whereas the break for the urban area happens around 2016, which is more related to the onset of our major flood events, the Memorial Day, Tax Day, Hurricane Harvey flood events. So in each of these cases, there is a definitive break in the data. I think, again, the more rural gauges are going to be more climate driven. And then the urban gauge at the very top, you see that the slope of this line continues to trend upward, which means that it has basically found a new flood regime after that time stamp. So after 2016, I think we are in officially a new flood regime for Cypress Creek at that urban area. Okay, so initially, just based on the land use, I would say that there was probably a break around 2000. Based on the statistical analysis, it's showing that we probably have more of a break in the later 2000 teens. I think there is probably still a significant break around the 2000s, especially for gauge 3. We're in the middle, that Little Cypress Creek. But I think it's interesting and it gives context to understand the spatial analysis, understand the land use changes. If you're going to be doing statistical analysis, I think a lot of times scientists will take their gauge data or even precipitation data, and they'll just analyze it without actually looking at how land use has changed also. And I think it's really important to incorporate that the changes in especially impervious surfaces and also some of our more natural landscapes. Okay, so we went through the flow duration curve analysis, quantile regression, rolling log Pearson type 3, and then the Petit test to determine if there was an actual shift in our flood regime. And I think definitively, especially for gauge 1, there is a significant change in flood regime for that area. So one thing that really sparked my interest a couple of weeks ago and made me want to share this data with y'all was, I sat in on the Katy Conservancy, like webinar, Zoom session a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about, all the great work that they're doing conserving these prairie lands out on the west side of Texas, and they showed a couple maps. And I was like, that looks familiar. That is a very familiar area. So I plotted some of the conservation areas that they have against the work that I have done. And they're in the green stars here around that gauge 2 area, the more rural area that is actually having, or it demonstrates a negative trend in flood regime response, which means it is a more resilient area to flooding. And I think it is very interesting that we have these more preserved natural landscapes out there that are, as we know, going to be more resilient to things like flooding because they have native vegetation, they have, the native wetlands that should be there, they are being preserved. So of the 3 gauges that we looked at, that one shows that it's actually performing better through time. And I think that was like my mind blew up moment because I got really excited and I started sending emails. And I was like, oh my God, you guys. Okay, so that's like one of the key takeaways for me from this work. And I hope that, it's landing with y'all as well. Those pasture lands and native prairies that we have are going to be much more absorptive to these major flood events. I do think that the magnitude of our 100-year flood events has actually increased, especially towards the urbanized areas. I think we've seen that just as a community, seeing some of the flooding that's happened, especially around like the 45 corridor. Looking at the breaks in flood regime and if our flood regime is actually shifting upward through time is very important for us to address as far as infrastructure as well. We have a lot of infrastructure that was put in the 80s that may not be suitable for an increased flood regime in today's world. So those older infrastructure projects, there are probably quite a few that need to be updated. But there's also the question of, can we incorporate more of these native landscapes back into, our communities to make them more resilient to flooding? Because we know that our wetlands are going to act as sponges. We know that, a concrete like covered drainage basin is probably not going to be helpful for the communities immediately around it. So is there anything else that we can do to try to make our environment more resilient? So anyway, that is the work that I did. I hope the statistics were easy enough to swallow, but yeah.
Geez, wouldn't it be something if developers actually had to do these studies through somebody like Felicia before they built another Target or Walmart or decided in Magnolia they want another 500 house development. As we talk about, when you start putting impermeable surfaces, not just, you think, oh, it's just a house, we're just gonna use water. All the water that comes up the roofs, the sidewalks, the driveways, the streets they had to put in, all the stores they had to put, the schools, all of a sudden, that rolling map that you showed me in development is scary.
Yeah, it was pretty eye-opening for sure.
And I love the part that says, maybe something people are doing having a positive, I love that. Yeah, this is a positive side effect. The longer into the session we go, the harder it is to get back to breaks because everybody's now talking to everybody. It's okay. Okay, all right. So we talked about all those. Groundwater, surface water, moving water, underwater. There's a lot of it, 191,000 miles. And here's the news. How many natural lakes we extended this? One, which is Cattle Lake. Cattle Lake is not really a natural lake, and it was restored by log jam several years ago, and they just kept it. So. Was that on your checklist? Right or rule of capture, is what I talked about. If you're on the land, you're on the water underneath. Like you're on the oil. Unless as Martha was telling me in her, in some end of life documents, they were talking about, underneath the land, allowing fracking rights in underneath the land.
I had to have my attorney remove that. It's just in there.
Yeah.
It's in there.
So the right or rule of capture exists. No law. Still creates lots of problems. It allows, with some exceptions for the groundwater use, it allows a lot of private companies on a lot of water out of land that they own and sell it. A lot. Surface water is like lakes, like creeks. Diffuse surface water is what runs off your land into the creek or storm drain or whatever. You own it while it goes across your land. It's here. First I'll ask, who owns the water tanks? Who owns all that water and all those rivers? Colorado, Brazos. Who owns? You own it. You, as a citizen of the state of Texas, own the water. It is held in trust for you by the state of Texas. And when you hear the trust fee of the state of Texas, it usually is in the hand of the water. So you know what that means. Groundwater is owned by the person that owns the land above. The Texas Water Code is a huge document that codifies all of this. Is source. Some of the key players, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ, besides a lot of other stuff together, they have been passed by the EPA to enforce a lot of the EPA rules in the state of Texas because they had the resources to do it. And that's water quality, water monitoring, pollution, all of those things. Groundwater conservation districts were specifically set up to do just that, try to protect the groundwater. If you live in Montgomery County, it's the Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District. If you live in Walker County, they're probably Blue Bonnet Groundwater Conservation District. There's 14 around the state. Do just that, protect all that aquifer water we just talked about. One of the most powerful, least understood agencies in the state of Texas, Texas Water Development. Appointed position, commissioners are appointed. They are responsible for creating and maintaining a 50-year forward water development plan for the state of Texas. Identify all of the programs that will cause that plan to be in effect and telling the state legislature what it's on. They're the ones that in the last legislature, they set aside $1 billion a year for the water fund. The Water Development Board is going to manage by its own admission. Texas Water Development Board said needed to get through that 50 years. We need to have $174 billion in development. At today's level. So, and they control a lot of that.
What are they developing?
They will developing dams, managing wells, permits through the groundwater conservation district. Anything related to those kinds of, dams, reservoirs, any of that. And you can go on their website and see the list. And it is pages and pages and pages.
The textbook mentioned that.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of dams planned.
Yes. And just an acre foot of water, one acre foot deep. 325,000 gallons of water. They're talking about acre feet, and you hear somebody using that term, that's. Is it not?
Sorry.
So,
That's all right.
surface water owned by the state, meaning us and their held in trust. Water rights are managed by permitting system. What else permitted? There's private appropriation. Water rights are granted under the rule first in time, first in right. Meaning older rights have priority to the shorter. If you've owned the land for longer, or you have the right to this water for longer than Michael over here does, you get the water. Water rights can be inherited, are transferred, and they keep their priority. So if you've got water rights, if you've got land and you own the water rights to those land, pass it down to your next. All of the surface water rights are fully allocated funds. If all that land is allocated for something. Interesting concept that water flowing down the river is owned by you, managed by the state. From normal shoreline to normal creek. It's here. Above that, anything above that, the number is the landowner. However, the landowner is there. You depend on some of that and permission. And if they don't get permission, and fine. If you build, like I would build a retaining wall right here to my property. Well, you don't get permitted for that, and it's a long, tough permitting process. You can be fined, and in some cases, they can take down the retaining wall and do remediation. A lot of the biggest pump will capture. Whoever has the biggest pump gets most water out of it. Still the case. Except groundwater conservation districts are not modified. So there are local rules and local control that can in trump of groundwater conservation. Most wells are exempt. And you go, oh, they can't pump with 25,000 gallons a day. That's a lot. How much water do you think your house?
2,000 a month.
2,000 a month. It's here, yeah. Mine's 2 or 3, depending on if I decided water. They don't understand or not. Maybe that's it not. So if you think about 2,000 for the month, these wells can pump 25,000 a day. What residential needs 25,000 gallons a day. That's a big pool. So, who governs it, starting at the federal level, the EPA, and all those other U.S. agencies. We've heard of all of them. Army Corps of Engineers, Fish and Wildlife. The interesting part when you get into Fish and Wildlife in Texas personal, there are some acts, the Endangered Species Act, for example, was talking about the animals. It had a statement in there where it says, you're not harming animals. You cannot harm the habitat in which the animals reside, live. So all of a sudden, the Endangered Species Act is right to protect wetlands, lakes, rivers, streams. And is used for that. USGS, Bureau of Recommended Natural Resource Conservation, on and on. a lot of that outside the Corps of Engineers is done primarily by the TCEQ. They're a very powerful organization. And they regulate pollutants, polluters, a lot of other things. It's what we talked about, that Texas Parks and Wildlife is part of it. Again, using the Endangered Species Act, for example, can protect a lot of water. Because there's endangered species. Public Utility Commission, the Railroad Commission is one of my favorites. What is a Railroad Commission? Why would they be worried about the water and the quality of water?
Manage oil and gas. Well,
Exactly. They manage oil and gas, and so who would be responsible in large part in terms of trying to clean up the zombie wells and our wells? The railroad. And the State Soil and Water Conservation Board. It's one of those full circle moments. I have a picture of my grandfather. I was just standing in front of the fence in front of his house with a soil conservation district sign on there because he was on the board of directors. Edwards Soil Conservation District. Yeah. When they say I was today years old, figured out how important that was. And then we have a lot of local river authorities. Who's some of their daughter? Oh, yeah, your daughter works for, is it Oasis or? Oasis and Delano River. Yeah. His daughter, I should say, the San Jacinto River Authority is one that services this part of the world. It provides a lot of services and manages that. If you live in this, in Texas, especially outside of Main City, I mean, just for utilities, how do people live in floods? Floods they are artificial utility districts that were designed to allow developers to install infrastructure and then manage it. You will see mud election, follow the election result, you'll see that in Bud 52 or whatever it was, number of voters 2, number of votes for 2, number of votes against 0. They will create a mud district, move a couple of people onto within the property on trailers, and then those people will vote for the infrastructure development. Woodlands did that. Sure, absolutely. It's how they got most of the infrastructure built. Here. It's there. Now, in retrospect, I lived in London one of the original one. And they actually do a pretty good job of managing the infrastructure. Rates stay low, which kind of a double-edged sword. Rates are low, so they use more water. Rates are high, they can use less. Soil and water, irrigation, levee, and on and on and on. All of these people have some touch to the water that you and I have. VA, what's their job? See all the things they do, environmental stewardship, access to accurate information, contaminated cleanup sites, they do the Superfund site. Where's the nearest, who knows where the nearest Superfund site is to where we are right now?
The Conroe Creosote.
The Conroe Creosote plant is not far from here. It's a Superfund site. When I bought the house in 1990, I had signs up later saying, no, this is here. Chemicals in the marketplace reduce your safety. The EPA as a government agency is sometimes subject to the whims of those out. So that's it. Give myself too much. Clean Water Act, developed a program. Started in 1948. It's called the Water Pollution Act. 1972, we put some more teeth into it. The Endangered Species Act. This is the law behind which all these people can go. Laws. see what it's designed to do. It's Fish and Wildlife, what they're responsible for. We work with a range of public and private partners to protect important habitat and increase species populations. This is where I would remind you to buy a duck stand and buy a fish house every year. A lot of that money goes back to Texas Parks and Wildlife Fund, like this. And they're not very expensive. It's actually a cool stamp. TCEQ, their job, public health and natural resources, clean air, clean water, and safe management of waste. Pretty simple. You should go to the TCEQ sites. TCEQ.texas.gov. A lot of interesting information, lots of good charts, graphs, maps. Water Development Board. See what it does. It assists with regional water supply, administering cost-effective financial programs, and looking at streams. Here's an article said, the last 50-year plan, 22, 24, but it doesn't address at all the growth of AI-based. So there's this huge plus added to whatever the 50-year plan was. And I know data centers are saying, oh, now we don't need a lot of water. Well, it's not them using the water, it's the electric company that provides the electricity that uses all the water. It's a gigantic footprint of the data center with impermeable surfaces across central Texas, rural Texas. Parks and Wildlife, again, is aquatic. Life in Texas, soil and conservation, which is one of the newest ones. They coordinate conservation non-point source water. What's a non-point source versus point source? Anybody know? I don't know that we ever talked about this. Point source means that I can say, this solution is coming from your plant, Felicia. I see the pipe coming out on the street. That's a point source solution. And I can go directly to Felicia and say, yeah, that's that. Non-point source solutions is the Woodlands Mall parking lot. It's drained off in your street. It's all the roads, it's a bit of the way. It's out of the watershed. Those are tougher to deal with. I will give you a non-point source solution that makes me crazy. Dog poop. Now I'm going to say that. If we once calculated, actually for my 2024 project for Texas Mathematics, Janet Carolla and Bruce Carradine calculated the estimated amount of dog poop that hits the ground within the Woodlands problem in 1 year. The answer was a little over 15 tons. Assuming people pick up 70% of it, and I'm giving that's I trust people more than I should. That's still 3 times a dog poop. And remember, it's not just a dog poop on the water, on the walkway. It's a step when you let your dog out the back, and now I can go potty one more time. And then you'll be. So, that almost, for some people with enough dogs, that can become a point source solution. Okay. James Center River Authority, we've talked about, it's one of the 10 major authorities in Texas. Long-term regional projects related to water supply and wastewater. For those of you that want or need to stay after cold, we'll be discussing wastewater treatment. I see that today. A couple of folks, I think, need an hour or so. Just to make sure you've got all of our hours for graduate. Groundwater conservation districts, municipal utility, we're talking about those. unincorporated area or fringes. And local water utilities. And that's, you got this. A snapshot. Your water.
I don't know whether you will know the answer to this. My father's career was with Federal Soil Conservation Service. Is that associated with the local and regional ones?
I would say it's much like the EPA is associated with TCEQ. The EPA is an agency setting those national standards. Either they control them directly, you know, a state that wouldn't have the resources, the EPA would be those states like Texas that had the infrastructure. TCEQ, they had said, you do this for us. We will let you do the management and treatment of these things and finding people.
Okay.
So it could be, depending on the state, it could be the EPA who's doing it directly, or if nothing else, in conjunction with the local, there was a local soil organization.
Okay.
Which there was in Texas. Any other questions, comments?
We weren't in Texas.
Oh, okay.
I did that wrong in Texas.
So you spent the last 4 hours. Is it, no pun intended, but, drinking a fire hose. Water and stuff. There's much more to it. This is, yeah, we just scratched the surface of the water.
You put it to 18 water. Is there a specific way?
Did you,
If you met your 40 and you wanted to put this.
it would be a single presentation, single presentation, AP single presentation. But put in there, either the words water stewardship or water ecology. And it hopefully will open up a little box for you that says Texas Water Specialist.
Okay.
Apply, you can click that and you get 4 hours towards Texas Water Specialist.
I think the box will be on too.
Only the water, only the water.
And there should be an 18 wires.
Is there anything water, Texas
Yeah.
Water?
Yeah,
There's anything Texas Water, that's right.
that's the one you should.
Yeah. Thank you.
18 water.
She's like, this is probably getting an interest. I think we should do.
Can we start the water program whenever? Do we have to start it?
You can, if you want to do it online, you can do it whenever. It's up. Read the chapter, take the test, submit the test, read the chapter, and when you get them all done, they'll, at some point in the far future, because they're so far behind, they'll send you a text that you're certified now that you've done your 8 hours of training and 10 hours of volunteer work. And a lot of the volunteer work you do here can double count. Not all of it, some.
If we're doing the chapters and reading and taking the test, you can find 1 hour per chapter.
Or you can wait till falls. And I restart. And then I teach a class through the Woodward Green. On Saturday mornings, 3 hours. You bring in the fall, bring in the spring, you get to your. All right. I have nothing left in my brain.
I enjoyed class with everybody.
Thank you, Martha. We want to thank Michael for his presentation.
Valerie will appreciate these.
Yes.
Or my granddaughters.
Yes, great presentation, great information. Wow. Wow. So, June 6th is the big day.
Next.
What time are you going to be here?
1:40.
1:40, if you're setting up for your presentation. And shortly thereafter, get here early, okay? Because it looks like we've gotten in a habit of arriving right on time, with a much less, maybe 5 minutes late. So let's be here, let's say at 1:50 at the latest. And please bring your friends and family and so forth.
Yes, it is a kid-friendly, family-friendly.
Yeah, it's very relaxed. Also, we want to remind you, get your hours in VMS, please. That is so important, because we want to make sure you're recognized for all of the work that you've done through this journey. And please volunteer to be on the training team next year.
Or anything.
Or any team. But we like to have more people involved in training, or any team. As Lisa mentioned, there are several opportunities available. Any opportunity that you find interesting, either reach out to Lisa at Heartwood Press or at training, Heartwood Training, and we'll get you plugged into whatever might interest you. So key takeaways, please place those on the board before you leave. Please chat with one another as you just made a great accomplishment in your journey here, and we'll see you soon.
You will be getting a survey.
Oh, yes, thank you,
Yeah,
Michael.
just like every other company in the world. We will circle at the bottom of the receipt. Please give me a survey. 5 are good. No.
Surveys
Yeah.
coming out.
Yeah.
2 surveys. One is to RSVP for the graduation and how many guests you'll be bringing. Second is a survey on your training progress and what was presented. So please complete those so we can make the program even better for the next group coming in. So key takeaways, if you want to stay after, need an extra hour, Michael is here. And be safe out there, enjoy nature.